Hey everyone, good evening. In today's video, I'm going to discuss on the idea of demand and supply. This concept is as some of you would familiar, is in economics, and this concept, which is around demand and supply, is in economics, and you need to understand that in today's world, if we have some basics clear in terms of economy that we live in, then it actually makes you well informed. It actually makes you more able to interpret information around political news, around economic news, around social aspects. So it's interlinked, right? Even in terms of commercial aspects, or if you do a business, again, the idea of economics is certainly going to be very, very useful. So this is a very basic class. I think this is more suitable for students who are in schools like IGCSE schools, learning economics. Very suitable for those students. And so this is something that we observe in our day-to-day life. If you are someone who consumes, so for example, if you we all as a family, we all have daily needs, right? We all have monthly needs of groceries, the basics of like water bills and electricity and let's say buying items to run the house. So the basics are always there for everyone, and then you have wants, and then you have demand. So let me first explain to you what really is a demand. So usually it is something that you want to purchase, but then you also need to be have the money to purchase it. If you do not have the money to purchase it, it is not a demand, right? Because demand would in economic terms, basically demand means that you're actually sort of moving the cash, right? Moving the cash. You're actually moving the cash. So for instance, let's take the grocery example. If I go on to a grocery shop and if I buy a kg, a packet of rice for the entire month, I'm paying the person, and in return of that, I'm getting the rice that I want for my grocery needs. So this is a demand because I've actually paid. Had I not made the cash transfer in exchange of the rice, then it would not have been demand, right? So that is what I'm trying to tell you. That the fundamental idea of demand is that you need to have something to buy, and then you need to have the money to buy it. That's what the economic terms of demand is. If you are someone who are meeting the needs of family through let's say apps these days, like those commerce apps, right, for grocery needs, even then you are transferring money to those people, to the owners of those apps, and then you're getting the grocery. So it is also qualifying under the definition of demand. Okay, let's now understand what really is the law of demand. What really is the law of demand? So there is a simple law of demand. If you read books and everything, you will see that usually there is a lot of definition of demand that is given, but usually that concept is what I just discussed. Law of demand will have demand and will also have price. तो मतलब कि एक तो डिमांड होगा और दूसरा प्राइस होगा. तो एक डिमांड है, दूसरा प्राइस है. अब ये इनका जो इंटरप्ले है डिमांड और प्राइस का, ये आपको बेसिकली एक लॉ के रूप में आपको दिखेगा, लॉ ऑफ डिमांड. सो व्हाट इज लॉ ऑफ डिमांड? यूजुअली व्हाट हैपेंस इज दैट इफ द प्राइस ऑफ सर्टेन कमोडिटीज गुड्स सर्विसेज आर राइजिंग, जैसे कि अगर मुझे जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल स्नैक्स खाने का बहुत शौक है, जस्ट फॉर एग्जांपल, and I see that some of my favorite snacks have increased in price, I might reduce my demand. These days, if you purchase in Amazon, you will see that sometimes the price of goods increase or decrease, right? And some in festivals, like if you have New Year or some festival, you'll see the price falling down. Why? What happens then? As the price falls down, what really happens is that you are actually able to purchase more of it, or you are more incentivized to purchase. So that's the law of demand. The law of demand usually tells you that there is an inverse relationship there is an inverse relationship between what? Between demand and between price, right? There is an inverse relationship between demand and between price. Pardon my handwriting. I'll try to improve this handwriting. I think I'll have to work on this, but I'll write it again over here. So there is inverse relationship, inverse relationship between what? Between demand and price. Okay, so there is an inverse relationship between demand and price. So so what happens is that if the price increases, the demand falls, and vice versa. That is, if the price decreases, the demand rises. Okay. So if you're listening to this, perhaps you're already smarter than what I just discussed. I think it's basic common sense also. So perhaps you already know this, but because I'm starting from a very beginning stage, I think it's good to tell you this. Then there are two concepts. One is ceteris paribus. सेटेरस पैरिबस इसका मतलब होता है कि बाकी चीजें सेम है। मतलब ये जो डिमांड है ना, ये सिर्फ प्राइस से डिपेंड नहीं करता, ये और भी चीज़ों से डिपेंड करता है। जैसे आपकी इनकम क्या है, आपको क्या पसंद है, कंज्यूमर टेस्ट, कंज्यूमर प्रेफरेंस। अगर आपको पसंद है आईफोन तो आप लोगे, चाहे वो महंगा हो या सस्ता हो। तो बहुत सारी चीज़ों को हमने इस लॉ ऑफ डिमांड में एज्यूम किया कि ये सारी चीज़ें सेम है। तो अगर ये सारी चीज़ें सेम है, तो फिर आप क्या कहोगे कि मतलब अगर ये सारी चीज़ें सेम है, देन व्हाट विल हैपन इज दैट the law of demand will follow, which is that if the price increases, then the demand will fall, and if the price falls, the demand will increase. एक और टर्म होता है जिसको हम कहते हैं लेसेस फेरे, वो मैं शायद बाद में इंट्रोड्यूस करूंगा। उसका भी वही मतलब होता है कि एवरीथिंग एल्स इज ऑलमोस्ट सिमिलर। तो सेंट्रस पैरिबस का यही मतलब हुआ कि बाकी चीज़ें जो है, जैसे प्रेफरेंस हो गया या इनकम ऑफ कंज्यूमर, अगर मेरी फैमिली में कोई इनकम सेम है, चेंज नहीं हुआ है, तो फिर मैं उनको एज्यूम कर रहा हूँ कि ये सारी चीज़ें सेम है, और सिर्फ प्राइस पे ही डिमांड का क्या असर है। दैट इज द इनवर्स रिलेशनशिप बिटवीन डिमांड प्राइस। So now, what else can I tell you? If you have understood this idea, you can also plot this on a graph. You can also plot this on a graph. Plot this on a graph. चलो, अगर हम ग्राफ की बात करें तो ये ग्राफ, सी पहले आपको ये समझना पड़ेगा कि ग्राफ में एक्स और वाई, ये दो एक्सिस होते हैं। ये आपको समझना पड़ेगा। और मैं एक एक्सिस में क्या करूंगा, मैं यहाँ पे डिमांड, डिमांड हमेशा क्वांटिटी में आएंगे, जैसे केजीज ऑफ राइस। और यहाँ पे मैं प्राइस इन रुपीज, प्राइस इन रुपीज। तो अब मैं एक इंटरप्ले आपको दिखाऊंगा। पहले मैं एक टेबल बना सकता हूँ, सो दैट इट इज इजियर। तो प्राइस, डिमांड। देखो, अगर आप इमेजिन करो, व्हाट इज योर फेवरेट थिंग टू बाय फॉर, लेट्स से इफ आई लाइक स्वीट्स। आई एम नॉट एडवोकेटिंग फॉर स्वीट्स, बट लेट्स से दैट I love to eat sweets. Let's take that for example, okay? So if there is something that I love to eat, for instance, a kind of healthy sweet, and perhaps the price of sweet is 100 rupees, I'm demanding five quantities. The price increases to 120, I will reduce my demand. Maybe I'll reduce my demand proportionally. So if the demand, see what has happened here is the price has increased, so I will have to technically reduce my demand. Similarly, the price decreases 80 or whatever the number is, then I might increase my demand. But usually what happens is that the law of demand will give you a curve which is known as a demand curve, जो ऐसा दिखेगा, demand curve। ये demand curve you can actually plot from the table itself। ये जो टेबल है आप इससे प्लॉट कर सकते हो। तो फॉर एग्जांपल, अगर ये डिमांड का, पहले आपको टेबल बनाना पड़ेगा फॉर दैट, व्हिच इज दैट यू हैव टू राइट एवरीथिंग। You have to write, okay, at this price, what is the demand at this price? Again, these are all assumptions. This is nothing in reality. You can make something of your own, some table of your own. Even in questions, you will see some of those things. So now you make a demand curve, and you will see that it is always in a downward sloping fashion। जो डिमांड कर्व बनेगा वो हमेशा डाउनवर्ड स्लोपिंग कर्व होगा, हमेशा डाउनवर्ड स्लोपिंग कर्व होगा। क्या? जो डिमांड कर्व होगा। फॉर एग्जांपल, एक दो तीन चार, मैं इसको एक यहाँ पे एक डिमांड लिखता हूँ, 4 5 6 8, और यहाँ पे प्राइस लिखता हूँ मैं। तो मैं इस पॉइंट अगर बात करें, यहाँ पे जो प्राइस है वो ज़्यादा है, और यहाँ पे जो प्राइस है वो थोड़ा सा कम है। यहाँ पे जो प्राइस है वो थोड़ा सा और कम है। यहाँ पे जो प्राइस है वो थोड़ा सा और कम है। सो व्हाट इज हैपनिंग इज दैट किसी एक पॉइंट को अगर आप लोगे तो यहाँ दिस इज 5,150. So what is 5 comma 150? 5 comma 150 means that at a price of 150, the amount of quantity that you are demanding is equal to 5 kgs, right? So that is the meaning of 5 comma 150. And you can notice the nature of the curve. It is kind of downward sloping in nature, right? तो ये था एक लॉ ऑफ डिमांड, एक डाउनवर्ड कर्व. अब इसी लॉ ऑफ डिमांड में मैं आपको दो चीज बताऊंगा, और फिर ये कॉन्सेप्ट खत्म हो जाएगा. फिर एक लास्ट कॉन्सेप्ट बचता है जिसको हम कहते हैं इंडिविजुअल डिमांड और मार्केट डिमांड. फिर वी कैन क्लोज दिस. तो अगर हम बात करते हैं कॉन्ट्रैक्शन और एक्सपेंशन, ठीक है. तो जैसे ये है प्राइस, ये है डिमांड. अगर ये जो डिमांड की लाइन है इसको मैं छोटा कर दूं, ठीक है, तो ये क्या हो गया, इसको हम कहेंगे डिक्रीज इन डिमांड. तो हम क्या कहेंगे, डिक्रीज इन डिमांड. देखो डिक्रीज का क्या मतलब है, अगर आप किसी एक प्राइस पे फिक्स हो जाओ, जैसे कि हम मान लो कि हमने इस प्राइस पे फिक्स कर लिया अपने आप को. अब यहाँ से आप देखो कि ये कर्व पे कहाँ पे इंटरसेक्ट करता है, तो ये यहाँ पे इंटरसेक्ट करता है. और फिर ये देखो कि ये सेम प्राइस पे दूसरे कर्व पे कहाँ पे इंटरसेक्ट करता है, यहाँ पे इंटरसेक्ट करता है. अब आप मुझे ये बताओ कि अगर यहाँ पे इंटरसेक्ट करता है, तो क्या ये वाली डिमांड ज्यादा कम है या ये वाली ज्यादा कम है? Obviously this demand is less, so which means that your demand has actually fallen from this place to a certain place which is this encircled here. तो एक डिमांड कर्व जो है वो ऐसे फॉल हो गया है, नीचे आ गया है. इसी का नाम है डिक्रीज इन डिमांड. ठीक है, मैं रिपीट करता हूँ. जो डिमांड कर्व ये नीचे आ गया और इसी का नाम है डिक्रीज इन डिमांड. Now, you may ask me what are the causes as to why decrease in demand happens. So decrease in demand may happen due to multiple factors. So one factor as to why decrease in demand happens is that your income as a family member or your father's basically consumer income is called in economics. So consumer income has fallen down. In that case, you may not demand the same thing as you used to earlier. So you will control your expenses, and or your taste and preference have now changed. You are moving to a different habit, etc., right? Moving to a different brand, etc. Or the same thing can also be written as, when you make the graph a little on the higher side, I'll make a fresh one actually. So this is let's say demand, this is price, and what I'm doing is that I'm moving from this place to this place. तो आप देखोगे कि क्या होगा कि किसी एक पॉइंट पे ये प्राइस है, सॉरी, और ये डिमांड है. तो किसी एक प्राइस पे, जैसे ये प्राइस है, ठीक है, तो यू विल सी दैट इस प्राइस पे जो हमारा डिमांड था वो पहले ये था. एंड नाउ बिकॉज देयर हैज बीन एन इंक्रीज ऑफ डिमांड, राइट, देयर हैज बीन एन इंक्रीज ऑफ डिमांड. What do you mean by increase of demand? It increase of demand means that at the same price, I'm going to try and demand basically, because at the same price something else has changed. Price has not changed. Law of demand में price होता है. Price has not changed, but because of the other factors, which can be like I got a bonus, my business got a new customer, I got a new client. Multiple factors can be possible, and therefore what can happen is that you are now able to demand more of the quantity, same quantity, maybe the same car, maybe the same toy, maybe the same something that you can imagine. So you can now demand the same thing but at a higher quantity. For example, if in the previous month you bought something for 50 rupees, 50 quantity, you're now able to afford the same at the same price, the same quantity, higher levels of quantity at the same price. So this is the classic example of what I call as the increase of demand, right? So remember that price has not changed. In fact, what has changed, price is same. In fact, what has changed is the income of consumer. Okay, what has changed is the income of consumer, or there can be a change in the preference of the consumer, right? Sometimes I like to joke about it that you know, if I want to change my favorite OTT platform, let's say from Hotstar to some other platform, then my preference or taste is changing, right? So even preference or taste will basically make all of these factors, which is increase or decrease in demand. So just to quickly recap, Law of demand is what we discussed first, then we discussed decrease in demand and increase in demand. And we have realized that decrease in demand and increase in demand are not dependent on price, they're actually dependent on other factors which were covered in ceteris paribus. And these factors are like preferences, tastes, consumer income, and also other things. So we'll slowly get to all of those things, but let's fixate on these two particular ideas about increase in demand and about decrease in demand, right? Wonderful. So let's now move to the next part. The next part is contraction and where's my cursor? Okay. So the next part is contraction and expansion in demand. So we call it it's not decrease, right? It's contraction and it's expansion. So I'll show you with the same graphical example, and it all applies to the law of demand as well. So for instance, if I make a price over here, if I make a demand over here, and then the same curve is drawn. Now in this case, I'm not going to change the curve. The curve will remain same as it is. For the same slope, it will remain as it is. So let me take this point and let me take this point, right? There are 2 points, and these 2 points, as you can see, are within the same particular line, which we call as the law of demand. So let's take this particular point. This point is A, this point is B. I'm going to ask you a question that which point do you think A or point B has higher price? Has higher price. So you'll obviously tell me that okay, this is at a higher price point, point number A. Then I will tell you that hey, in the month of June I was here. In the month of July I was here. Okay. So in which month has my price, or in which month has my demand sort of increased? You look at the figure and you'll say, okay, B is the increased demand, and this has happened in the month of July. That's what you're going to tell me. That hey, B is the month where increased demand has happened. It has happened in the month of July. Now, if this is true, that B is the increased sort of this thing, what can you do now is that you will see that this particular B also corresponds to a lower price. The price over here is lower. So this is not same as increase in demand because we are not changing the curve. Here the increase has happened solely increase has happened, and this is sort of different. So increase has happened. Why? Because the price has decreased. Okay. If the price had remained same and other things would have changed, then we call it something else, which is what earlier graphs were about increase in demand. But this is not because of other factors. This is actually because of the price factor, right? So be careful about this particular idea, which is about the idea of the price factor that you have to sort of figure it out. What does expansion differ from increase in demand? And the same thing can be reversed. For instance, if the same thing can be reversed in a matter of like this, so you go from here to here, what is happening is that you're contracting your demand, right? You're not increasing your demand. You are lessening your demand to a higher. This is a demand, this is price. So moving from a higher demand point to a lower demand point. That is what you exactly you're doing. So you're moving from a higher demand point to a lower demand point. Now, if you move from a higher demand point to a lower demand point, what is happening is that you are reducing your quantity required for your purchase, for your requirement. And this is on account of increase. Is it increase? Yeah, this is on account of increase in price. This is an account of increase in price. So if you sort of increase the price, your demand will have a inverse or the other kind of effect, which is the effect in demand will be that the quantity demanded is going to be reduced, but because solely of the increase or decrease in price. That is the perfect sort of idea that I wanted to share with you. Okay, finally, we have done two-thirds of the concept. We're moving to the last concept because I'm for the first time making a 30-minute video on this particular topic. Usually I make 10-minute videos, but the themes are quite different. Let's see if you would be interested on this. So so let's move on to the last concept. The last concept is around individual and market demand. Individual and market demand. Okay, this is the last concept, which is around the idea of individual and market demand. Now, what do you mean by individual and market demand? So when it comes to individual and market demand, let's, as the name says, individual, right? So it is me, it is you. What is the quantity that you demand? That is what individual demand is. So if you demand 5 kgs of samosas, kg. If you demand four samosas, if you demand two coffees, that's your individual demand. You can go to CCD, you can go to Starbucks, that's your individual demand. But if you add all the demands of each individual, for instance, if you add the demand of your friends, let's say this is me, this is Shivani, this is Rohan, this is Rehan. So all of these friends are demanding Starbucks coffee. The price of Starbucks coffee is $10, and I am demanding 2 units. My friend is demanding 4 units. The other person is demanding 1 unit. The other person is demanding 3 units. These are all examples of individual demand. Now, what happens is that if I add all of these, which is if I do an aggregate of sorts, if I do an aggregate of sorts, which means if I add two, if I add four, if I add one, if I add three, let's do an exercise. If I add two plus four plus one plus three, what do I actually end up getting? We get two plus four is two plus four is six. Six plus one is three. Six. No, no. Six plus one is seven. Seven plus three is 10. So this is what? This is the addition of all the individual demands. Now, when you add this, you are able to get 10 quantity of coffee because coffee is something that you would relate perhaps better. So what you're getting 10 quantity or 10 units of coffee. Now this 10 units of coffee that you're actually getting is something that is known as aggregate demand, and you can actually refer to this in concept. It is known as the market demand also. And I will leave it to you with this example of slope also. So individual demands we saw were always a flat, sorry, are always sloping line. But if you add Rohan's demand, if you add Rehan's demand, if you add your friend's demand, what then happens? Would this still remain a steep sloping line, or would it change? Right? So if you think about it, it is going to be a little more downward sloping but flatter. It is going to be a little more flatter. It is still going to be downward sloping, but little more flatter. And something like this. And this is known as the market demand uh, curve, or it's known as a market demand schedule, right? Market demand schedule. डिमांड कर्व भी ठीक है, स्केड्यूल भी देख सकते हैं। तो पॉइंट है कि हाउ इज इट कमिंग, हाउ व्हाट इज द process behind it, right? If you understand that, then most of the things are actually done, and that is how you have to figure it out. So that's it. I think we have covered three concepts: law of demand. Just to quickly summarize, we started with law of demand, फिर हमने इंडिविजुअल डिमांड की बात करी आखिर में, उससे पहले हमने इंक्रीज और डिमांड or decrease in demand, expansion and contract, and then finally we came down to this point about individual and market demand. Here जो last one. So three things we have discussed. I hope you like this idea, and please let me know if you are able to learn, or if I can improve my user interface, the way I write and so on. So thank you for listening. Have a good day.